With 3 series and 10 days left before the All-Star break and injuries mounting for the Mets pitching staff, they have to be thinking about one thing right now: survival.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Now, I'm very happy that I was able to do a live stream after the Mets win on Thursday night because there is so much that happened on Thursday. This has given me the space to spend a show, as I already did, talking about that Mets win, talking about how David Peterson once again was the one pitcher in this rotation that can give them length and really delivered. Ryan Stanek, Edwin Diaz held down that lead. Really great stuff from the back-end arms in the Mets bullpen. The offense did just enough. It was a huge win. The first series victory the Mets have had in exactly 3 weeks, and a much-needed one, as they are just in this point of the season where I would describe it as survive in advance. That's where the Mets are at with the continued injuries that they've had. They're now leading Major League Baseball with 15 players on the IL. 12 of them are pitchers, and it's just injury after injury after injury, and particularly to this starting rotation, as the news on Thursday was Paul Blackburn had hit the IL with shoulder impingement. Also, Daniel Nunez goes on the IL with an elbow sprain. When it comes to the rotation over the past 3 weeks, you had Senga go down, you then had McGill go down, you lose Canning for the year, and now it is Blackburn, where the Mets are just trying to cobble together a rotation to get to that break. Meanwhile, Daniel Nunez, awful news for him. This could be Tommy John surgery. They are making it clear that they're getting a lot of opinions. There's no complete tear of the UCL, but there's definitely something going on with that ligament. If you remember last year, he had the flexor tendon strain, and they were concerned about something like this happening. That's why they really put the bubble wrap on him early this season to try to protect him. And of course, as soon as he finally starts to pitch well, maybe any thought of injury left his mind. Maybe he just started to really let it rip and go for it and, let it eat. And maybe that's when something happened. Who knows? But unfortunately, this could be another reliever gone for the Mets this season. And that's become a real pattern. You had AJ Minter go down, Danny Young go down. Trying to think if there's any more. I mean, Max Kranick recently went down. It doesn't seem like it's a season-ending thing. But the Mets just continue to get hit by injury. And Nunez now is another high-leverage arm that is potentially completely off the table. So when it comes to the Mets bullpen, we will start there. Zach Pop was just signed to a major league deal. So this is a new arm that's going to cycle through this roster at some point, whether that's for a day, a weekend, a week, who knows. Pop might join the team on Friday. There's every chance that the Mets might slow play this. I think they did the same thing with Justin Garza, where there's probably some type of a grace period before you have to activate a player. And so this might just be the Mets' way of trying to cycle a fresh arm through there, as they selected the contract of Rico Garcia on Thursday to bring a fresh arm up in place of Blade Tidwell. Also, the one silver lining to having to put 2 guys on the injured list is it allowed the Mets to bring up a couple of guys that otherwise would not have been eligible to return in Justin Hageman, who very well might get the start tonight. We'll save some of that for later, or at least be the bulk relief guy. And they also brought back Austin Warren, who actually I'm excited to see pitch in this bullpen, and I hope he sticks around. Now, when it comes to Pop, he's a 28-year-old that has a heavy 96-mile-per-hour sinker, had his best season in 2022 with the Marlins and the Blue Jays, where he pitched to a 2.77 ERA. But it was pretty much a disaster after that with Toronto. Eventually got cut this year, ended up with Seattle in 9 appearances in AAA with the Mariners. He pitched to a 3.52 ERA, came out to the big leagues, did okay for a couple appearances, but then in his fourth appearance, he gave up 7 runs. That's why he is now sporting an ERA of 13.50. So we'll see. We'll see if Pop sticks with the Mets. This very well could just be a guy that you watch make a cameo and never see from him again. But I do think that Austin Warren could potentially stick in this bullpen. And if he does, you look at where the Mets are at. You got Edwin Diaz, Ryan Stanek, Jose Butto, Reed Garrett, Huascar Braziman. Those 5 guys are locked in. Let's say Warren sticks around. That's 6. And then you have 2 spots that you can still cycle guys through. I don't know who Pop is going to replace on the roster. Like I said, it very well could be a situation where somebody pitches on Friday and then it's a roster move that way where Rico Garcia maybe gets an inning and then you bring Pop into the mix. Maybe a Sticky Love Lady that ends up getting cut again. Who knows? But the Mets are sitting in a spot where they have those 5 arms for sure in Diaz, Stanek, Butto, Garrett, and Braziban. They might keep Warren, but you never know. The other 3 spots in the bullpen, you can keep flipping guys. And because this rotation is so, completely dismantled due to injury, you really only have 3 starting pitchers on your active roster right now. You got Clay Holmes, David Peterson. We just saw those 2 guys pitch. And then you have Frankie Montas, who will pitch on Saturday. But that really means you got 10 spots in the bullpen that guys can cycle through until you get some pitchers back off the injured list next week. We're going to talk about them in the next segment, Kodai, Senga, and Sean Manaea. But you're looking at Chris Stefanski, Tyler Zuber, Justin Garza, Ty Adcock, all these guys who are on the 40-man roster that could come back and make another cameo this week. But you always have to wait those 15 days after you've been assigned to AAA before you're eligible to return. So when it comes to the clock on these guys, again, Warren and Hageman were both allowed to come up because of replacing an injured player. Assuming there's no more injured players, which is a very tough thing to assume right now for the Mets, you're looking at Chris Stefanski, who could return on Wednesday. Tyler Zuber could return on Tuesday. Justin Garza could actually come back on Sunday. And Ty Adcock is eligible to return today. So the Mets are starting to be able to bring some of these guys back up. And it's going to be a lot of that. It's going to be a lot of the shuffle once again, just trying to make it to the finish line, particularly of this series, as the Mets have 1 starting pitcher going to this series in Frankie Montas. And that's it. So you wonder with all of that, you wonder why the Mets are sitting in this situation where they have another injury to their rotation. They're left without a starter on Friday night. And yet they make the decision to have Nolan McClain, their top pitching prospect, start for the Syracuse Mets on Thursday. Why did they do that? Why is David Stearns so against giving one of the other kids a shot to make a spot start or 2? I want to talk about that more in the next segment. What is the plan here? Why are the Mets so convinced on this decision of just sticking with a bunch of relievers and hoping that Justin Hageman and Brandon Waddell can get them through this weekend? I'm going to go through it all here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to the ballpark with friends or family? It's 4th of July today. Maybe you want to head out, check out a baseball game. Suddenly you realize, all right, we're going to go. That's exactly where GameTime comes in. It is the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. GameTime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals. You can see the view for your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive, and you have the lowest price guarantee that takes all the worry out of buying tickets. This is why when I go to a game, I'm waiting until I'm about to walk into the ballpark before I buy my tickets, and GameTime is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an upcoming MLB game like Mets Yankees this weekend for a Subway Series. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use the code Locked On MLB. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code Locked On MLB. That's LOCKEDON MLB for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. We're getting closer and closer. Appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. So this weekend, if you look at the Mets' plans, it appears like Brandon Waddell and Justin Hageman are both going to get starts or be bulk relief options for the Mets, as they are basically going to run 2 bullpen games against the New York Yankees. And I'll talk about that series more in the next segment. It's funny because I joked on the live stream after the game on Thursday. After the Mets win, I said, get ready. I think my close to that episode was get ready to see a lot of Justin Hageman and Brandon Waddell this weekend. That was before Will Salmon of The Athletic reported that is what the Mets are planning to do, that they're planning to bookend this series with Hageman, then Waddell. Now, when it comes to Hageman, we haven't seen him a lot lately. He's made 2 appearances this year, has done well with the Mets, a 1.50 ERA, but in AAA, his ERA has been over 6. Now, if you look at June, he actually pitched pretty well this past month. A 3.48 ERA across 20 and 2/3 innings pitched. That was across 5 appearances. He's been averaging about 4 innings every time out. He's gotten up to 86 pitches, but has also only thrown 55 at times. So there's a wide range on how much he's going to be used, but this is a stretched out arm. So there is every chance that even if he doesn't do well, he can wear it for the Mets and just eat up a bunch of innings today. That's what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to likely go with an opener, it's my guess, go to Hageman and just see where they're at. And then Saturday, they got Frankie Montas. Sunday, they would have Brandon Waddell, but Waddell pitched on Wednesday, so he'd be going on 3 days rest. I don't think you can expect much more than the 3-inning spurts we've seen in his last 2 outings. So, yeah, maybe you got 9 outs from Waddell, 10 if you're lucky, but that's a lot of innings to cover from this bullpen. And it leads you to wonder, why not call up a top prospect? Why did you let Nolan McLean make a start in Syracuse, where, by the way, he pitched really well tonight? He struck out 10 in 5 innings pitched, has the ERA at 2.80, allowed 2 runs on 7 hits, walked 1, hit a batter, had a good start. But no Nolan McLean. He's not going to make a start this weekend, clearly, and he probably won't make a start at all in the first half. Why are the Mets making that decision? Well, David Stearns talked about it before the game on Thursday. He said that he typically likes to avoid promoting top prospects for spot starts. He would rather have them get a situation where they can have 3 to 5 starts to really at least get a full taste and acclimate to big league competition. As he said, debuts don't always go well. So he'd rather give these guys multiple opportunities to really get the big league experience and develop and prove themselves, rather than, hey, come up for 1 start and then you're not going to see him again, which is almost why the Mets have been leaning on Blade Tidwell this year, because I think as an organization, while they still like Tidwell and they still believe in his development and they still probably think he might be a starting pitcher for them at some point in the future, or he could be a piece of their bullpen long-term, they are not as invested in Blade Tidwell as they are in Nolan McLean or Brandon Sproat. It's evident by how they're using these guys. So that is the decision the Mets are making. Now, the reason why they don't feel like it's time to call on those guys is because they believe that if one of them was to start this weekend, it would only be for a spot start. Why do they feel that way? Well, the expectation, and this is really good news, is that they're going to get both Kodai Senga and Manaea back before the All-Star break. Remember when John Heyman was reporting that Kodai Senga was going to be back in August? Well, he was wrong. That's why you should not always listen to a John Heyman who, not to knock his reporting, but, I just, sometimes he might make some assumptions. I always thought that Senga could be back early. I've been telling you guys on the show that he could be back at some point in July. He's back even sooner than I expected. I didn't really know that he was going to be able to come back before the break, because I knew he was throwing with that hamstring. He wasn't able to run, but he was still able to throw for all this time. I didn't realize how little of a ramp up he was truly going to need, because the expectation now is that Kodai Senga will make a start in Binghamton on Saturday, or for Binghamton. I don't know where they're at. I think they might be in Hartford, but regardless, he will make a rehab start. And if all goes well, the plan is that he can return to the rotation on Friday in Kansas City. For Manaea, we talked about it on yesterday's show. He said he hoped his next appearance might be on a big league mound. That's not going to happen. He will make another rehab start, but that'll be on Tuesday. And the expectation is he will be good to go on Sunday. So in that final series where the Mets are going up against the Royals, they very well could have Kodai Senga and Manaea bookending that series. you look at what they have coming up here. They get through this weekend. You got Clay Holmes, who pitched on Wednesday, so he'll be good to go on Tuesday on 5 days rest. You have David Peterson, who could then go on Wednesday, also on 5 days rest. And then Frankie Montas, who's pitching on Saturday, could return on 4 days rest and pitch on Thursday. So the Mets have the starting pitching to get through the Baltimore series. And then they have Senga and Manaea for the Royals series. What they won't have, though, is a pitcher on Saturday for that series. They could go to Clay Holmes on 3 days rest for maybe 50 pitches as sort of a pseudo bullpen because he'll be obviously not throwing for the All-Star break. If they wanted to, maybe David Peterson can give them an inning or two going into the break. We've seen teams do that in the past with some of their guys. Just get them into a game, utilize them a little bit. Maybe that's the plan for next Saturday. Or I think really the plan right now is worry about next Saturday when you get through this weekend. I don't think that this front office can think that far in advance. But when they look at this weekend, they're saying, all right, how do we survive 27 innings? How do you get through it? And if you believe you're going to get 5 or 6 from Montas and you think you're going to get 4 from Hageman and you're going to get 3 from Waddell, let's just call it 6 from Montas to make it easy. So we'll say that's 13 of your 27 innings. Well, how do you get through 14 innings across 3 games? Like, okay, well, Budo might give you 3, and then you might get 2 from Garrett and 2 from Diaz and 2 from Stanek, and then we're going to cycle in a bunch of guys. Like, they are just survive in advance mode. That's why I titled the show that today. It's just figure out a way to get through it. And they will have, for that game on Saturday next week, potentially Hageman and Waddell to be able to once again, factor in some form of long relief. And they also would have Jonathan Pintaro, who we only saw briefly, who's stretched out, who's on the 40-man now, who would be eligible to return as well. So that is what the Mets are looking at here. They currently believe that their best bet here is just to do everything they can to cycle arms, figure it out, do bullpen games, get creative, and just get to this finish line rather than calling on these top pitching prospects. And I think part of that is the development side of it. They really might believe wholeheartedly that it's not good for their development to come up and make one start. Also, it is adding guys to the 40-man roster that you don't have to. And if the expectation is you're going to have a veteran-led staff in the second half, that you might go out and trade for a starting pitcher. You don't have to start the service time clock on a Nolan McLean, your top overall prospect right now by some outlets. I know for Just Baseball, he's our number 1 Mets prospect. He's in the top 40 when it comes to prospect in all of Major League Baseball. So don't start the service time clock. Don't add to the 40-man roster before you have to. Keep that roster flexibility until there is a clear runway for Nolan McLean to be a factor in your rotation for a month. And that could still come in the second half. And same thing goes for Brandon Sproat, who hasn't pitched as well as Nolan McLean this year, but he did have a really good start his last time out. They've talked about a change in mindset where they wanted him to just attack and to not try to be so perfect with all of his pitches. And all of a sudden, the velo was up, and he had his best start of the season. 6 scoreless innings, allowed 2 hits, walked 3, struck out 6. Now, Brandon Sproat is still a potential option this weekend. Mike Mayer, Mets Prize, did report earlier on Thursday that Sproat was in consideration to make a start. I would hope that they aren't going to pitch him in Syracuse on Friday. He absolutely could, because he would, I think, probably be in line to make that start, but I would take him off the table. I hope they do, to just see what happens on Friday at Citi Field, because things don't go well. Hageman only gives you 6 outs and you have to use your bullpen to get through the game. You might be in a position where you're really, really pressed. Maybe you need to go to Waddell after Montas on Saturday. Who knows? He's been tipping pitches. I know he said he cleaned it up, but if there's a team that's going to take advantage of you tipping pitches, it's the Yankees. I mean, who knows how many innings he's going to get you through. I just would wait. I'd wait, and I would make Brandon Sproat start on Sunday just in case. So worst case scenario, you have a guy that you can call up that can make a spot start. Personally, I would have just gone to McLean on Friday and saved Hageman, have Hageman available in relief all weekend, and potentially he's your starter on Sunday. But that's not what they're doing here. It is survive in advance. It is just do what you can to get to the finish line of this first half without tapping into some prospects that you'd rather still focus on their development. And we'll see how it plays out for the Mets. but this is going to be a very up in the air, wild weekend against the Yankees, where the Mets are going in with not a lot at their disposal when it comes to their staff, comparative to a Yankees team that's going to have Carlos Rodon and Max Fried for the final two games of this series. I want to talk about this series to close out the show here in just a minute. If you're an everydayer that's always tuning into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime, take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways, get the line graphics sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Well, the good news about the Mets playing against the Yankees this weekend is they are down as bad as the Mets have been lately. Obviously, the Mets are riding some momentum after winning this series against the Brewers. Little 2-game winning streak. That's a lot better than the Yankees are doing. They're coming off getting swept by the Blue Jays. If you look at the Yankees' last 20 games played, they're 6-14. If you look at the Mets' last 20 games played, they're 6-14. These teams have collectively tanked here, and they have both let their division leads slip away. The Phillies now in first place in the National League East. The Blue Jays, after sweeping the Yankees this week, are now in first place in the AL East. So some big changes for these teams, and they're both pretty desperate, I think, to get to the break. The Yankees, however, are set up much better this weekend. When you look at their lineup, it hasn't really been individual hitters that have struggled. I almost would have to go game by game to figure out what's been going on with the Yankees. Because you look at the last 2 weeks, Aaron Judge has been red hot because he always is. Jazz Chisholm's been swinging a hot bat. Trent Grisham has as well. Cody Bellinger, Ben Rice. A lot of their hitters are doing pretty well. You look at the team ERA over the last 2 weeks, it is bottom 10, but it's not like the Mets ERA over the past 2 weeks, which is over 6. It's like a 4.77 ERA for the Yankees. So it doesn't seem, just based on surface level stats, like it's been as bad for the Yankees as it's been for the Mets. And yet, over a 20-game span, they've both been equally as awful. As you look towards the pitching matchups in this series, this is where the Yankees have a huge advantage, because I think the one game where the Mets have a real chance to have a big day offensively is today, because Marcus Stroman's on the mound in his second start off of the injured list. His first one was pretty solid, 5 innings pitched against the Athletics, allowed 1 run on a solo homer, gave up just 3 hits, walked 2, struck out 1. But Stroman has been prone to some blowout starts, particularly in the Yankees uniform. The thing is, the Mets are countering with Justin Hageman. Now, I would think Huascar Braziban might make the start as the opener, and then you go to Hageman. I think the hope is maybe you can get 12 outs out of Hageman, and so the combination of Braziban and Hageman might get you through 5 innings. And if you are winning through 5, then you do everything you can to get this game. You got Jose Butto pretty well rested here, so Butto's certainly a guy that can give you multiple innings of relief. Reed Garrett probably has to be in the high leverage mix for this one, just because Edwin Diaz and Ryan Stanek each pitched back-to-back days. So I don't know if either of those guys is going to go 3 days in a row. I would sort of doubt it, although I wouldn't rule out Edwin Diaz in a save situation. The Mets were just thinking, all right, this is our one chance to maybe win a game this series. And if you let Edwin Diaz rest of the weekend, at least you got one. I mean, maybe that's where they're at with it, but really, you just got to hope that the bats can go off. I mean, that's what needs to happen throughout this entire weekend. The Mets need to hit, and it's going to be tough to hit after Friday, as Carlos Rodon has been very good this season. He's going on Saturday up against Frankie Montas. Rodon allowed 1 run in his start against the Mets earlier this season. That run came on 2 hits. He also walked 4, so maybe he can get a little bit wild. Pitch count can go up a little bit. You might be able to get him out of the game early. On the season, though, he's got a 2.95 ERA. Meanwhile, Frankie Montas, the story for him that just came out was he was tipping pitches. Against the Braves, he was tipping his splitter. Against the Pirates, he was tipping his breaking pitches, his sweeper and his slider. So I don't know how confident I feel that he's going to be able to clean it up. He says that he has. But typically, these are tendency issues that can always pop up. If you are a guy that's prone to tipping, like a Luis Severino, you can get caught up in it. And if Frankie Montas is one of those guys, all of a sudden, it could be a short start and a long day for the Mets on Saturday. I hope not, but that doesn't make me very confident. The one starting pitcher the Mets have in this series is coming off of a couple starts where he was reportedly tipping. That's not great, especially when the final game of this series is essentially a bullpen game for the Mets. Yes, Brandon Waddell might get the start or might get the bulk appearance. I mean, there's every chance that the Mets just decide, all right, Huascar Brazoban this weekend, you're going to open on Friday and open on Sunday. Okay, that's fine and well. Well, again, you're probably not going to get much more than 3 innings out of Waddell on 3 days rest. So you're going to have to cover a lot of innings, and you're going up against a guy that, if not for Tarek Skubal and Garrett Crochet, he might be the front runner for the AL Cy Young in what is an absolutely loaded race. I mean, Jacob deGrom's got an ERA in the low 2s. I don't think he might not even finish top 5 this year for Cy Young. It's that loaded in the American League. Fried is so good, and he dominates the Mets. When you look at the pitching matchups, it's very hard to see the path to the Mets winning a series. And maybe that was their decision on the pitching prospects. It was just a matter of, I don't think that we're going to win. Obviously they're not thinking that way. That's a ridiculous take. So I do take that back, but it's going to be very difficult, and it's going to really have to be the bats. The Mets have to lead with their offense. They're not going to win a game this weekend 2-0. And because I said that, they probably will. And if I jinx them into a 2-0 win, awesome. But it just would not seem very likely that you're going to get through Aaron Judge in that lineup 4 times with Hageman, Zach Pop, and Dickie Lovelady. I don't know. I don't know. And that's where I get back to the survive and advance thing. You look at the road ahead, 9 games over 10 days to get to the break. In Baltimore against a bad team, again, Clay Holmes, David Peterson, Frankie Montas. Not a bad set of pitchers for that series. You look at the series in Kansas City, Kodai Senga, and it could be a fully stretched out, fully realized Kodai Senga. If he pitches on Saturday and we look at the AA results and it's, he went 6 innings and got up to 85 pitches. Well, you're like, all right, cool. That's a Kodai Senga start. You got that. If Sean Manaea gets up to 75 pitches in his final rehab start, he might be close to full go. So you look at that series against the Royals, okay, you feel pretty good about it. I think the Mets are going to have to stack some wins on that road trip. I think they actually can stack some wins on that road trip and maybe make this a much better finish than what I am kind of projecting right now. But I look at the Mets, I look at where they're at, I look at this weekend against the Yankees where on paper they have a disadvantage in every single game of the series. And I say win 4 of the final 9. I don't care how you get there. Win 4 or 5. Just keep your head above water. If the Mets were to win 4 of their final 9 games in the first half, they would go into the break at 54-43. If you told me on opening day that the Mets would go into the All-Star break at 54-43, 11 games over 500, I would have signed up for it. And remember, their hope is that they're going to get out of this All-Star break, get on the other side of it with a healthy rotation of Sean Manaea, Kodai Senga, David Peterson, Clay Holmes, and Frankie Montas, with Paul Blackburn potentially not that far behind. So they believe that there's light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to these injuries. And they also have Brooks Raley that could slide into the bullpen, and Jesse Winker and Francisco Alvarez could always come back too on the other side of the break to lengthen this lineup. I know that Francisco Alvarez went 1 for 4. I don't believe it was a home run. Actually, I know it wasn't a home run. I don't know if it was a single or a double or what it was, but let me give you your really, really quick here Jesse Winker update. What did Winker do on his rehab game here? He went 1 for 2. I saw he had an RBI single, got thrown out at second base, trying to stretch it to a double, and he drew a couple of walks. So he has been doing pretty well there in Binghamton. Likely stays there for the rest of the week. Maybe next week he spends some time in Syracuse. And I do believe Jesse Winker very well could be back on the other side of the break. So good news on that front as well. Also, Ryan Clifford, as I'm looking at the box score here, 3-run homer for Clifford, his 14th of the season. He's got his OPS at 820. You got Nick Morabito at an 802 OPS. And you have Carson Bench batting third for this Binghamton team with Jet Williams in center field for the game. Benj was playing left. He went 1 for 3. He's got an 878 OPS in a limited stint here so far up at AA. How many games is it that we're working with here on the sample size? 8 games. Has a home run, a double, 7 walks to 3 strikeouts, a couple stolen bases. Carson Benj playing pretty well. I think I want to talk prospects at some point this week, and if we can fit it in with all the news, I will be doing some live streams across this weekend. Chris Schubert, again, is out for the rest of this week, taking all of his summer vacation at once here. Good for Chris. He definitely deserves it. So Chris won't be back until, I believe it'll be at this point, Tuesday for his next postcast. So I've been filling in, giving you some live streams after the game for all of you who have gotten used to that pattern of having a show on this channel available to you right after the game ends. I can't necessarily commit to doing a 4th of July show because I don't entirely know how my afternoon and early evening is going to work out today. I think I might have some dinner plans, but if it's a quick game, I might be able to hop on and do a live stream. If not, you'll have a full edition of Locked On Mets available to you on Saturday morning. So you can stay tuned for that. Happy 4th of July to all of you. I hope you enjoy some time with your friends and family today. Just relax. And when you watch Mets baseball, if Justin Hageman gives up a 4 spot in the first inning or the second inning, just turn it off. Okay, just turn it off. And I'll give you the full recap on a show, whether it's after the game that you can tune into later or if it is in the morning. Again, I appreciate all of you for tuning into the show. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. If you are an everyday listener that wants to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description and go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out Locked On MLB Game Night. Locked On MLB Game Night is the show that I'll take you around all the action in Major League Baseball with insight for our local experts, as well as a couple of hosts bringing you around all the action across the league. You find Locked On MLB Game Night on the Locked On MLB YouTube channel, as well as the Locked On MLB podcast feed.